Hello, everyone. Welcome. If you want, tell us in the chat where you're tuning in, where you are tuning in from. I'd love to know. It's been one of the best parts of doing these is people can join us from all over the place. So I'm in Seattle. Anna's out on the Olympic Peninsula, and Trina is tuning in from Denmark. We have Ballard in Seattle from Erica. All right. All right, we're going to give it just a few more seconds. Broadview in Seattle, San Antonio, Texas, Minneapolis. So fun. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we will just let people continue to tune in. I'm Laura Hamilton. I have a shop in Seattle called Book Larder, which is in Seattle's Fremont neighborhood. And in in-person, more normal times, we do a lot of author talks and cooking classes in our shop, and have taken those to Zoom. And one of the nicest parts of that has been that we can welcome guests from all over the world and also talk to authors all over the world. We have had the pleasure of actually hosting Trine Hahnemann a couple of times in the past, and we were discussing how she probably would have come to visit for this book too, and would have been, you know, sitting in London with a glass of champagne right now. But we make do, and we will make the best of the situation. We are so delighted to celebrate her book, which actually comes out next week. Her latest book, it's called Scandinavian Green. It is so new that I do not have my copy yet to wave at you, but Trine has hers, and she'll be able to show you a little bit of it during the talk. The book is available on our website, booklarder.com, and you can support this talk by, if you are purchasing it from us. Trine is going to be in conversation with Anna Brones. Anna is a longtime friend of Book Larder also. She is a paper cut artist. You may have seen a lot of her work on Instagram and in lots of other places. And she actually recently did a beautiful version of Book Larder's logo for us that we've put on cups and t-shirts and all kinds of things. She is also an author and is of a Swedish background and has written books about fika and lagom and other Swedish sort of food and lifestyle topics. So she and Trine are going to talk about the book. We are, of course, going to leave time for your questions. So please, if you could, just use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen for your questions. That will make it easier for me to keep track of those. And just jump in, you know, sort of whenever you feel the need to with those questions, and we'll sort of add them in as it makes sense. So I am going to welcome Anna and Trine to the Zoom and turn things over to them.
Hello.
Hello. Anna, are you there?
We lost Anna.
She'll join.
Yeah.
Trine, how are things in Denmark?
They are interesting. No, they are. I think I don't think we can complain in the broad scale of things. I think things are calm and okay. We have had a very low record of people being really ill, and things are. It's so much easier to be such a small country, I think. So
yeah,
that makes sense as well.
Yeah.
But my business is doing okay. I'm still having my cooking school open.
Oh, good.
And the bakery is open. Yeah, we are allowed to gather up to 50 people.
Mm-hmm.
So we do the cooking school with the masks on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's but of course it's very tough for the restaurant business. Everything has to close at 10.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have our events, they start at 4 instead of at 7. But there's also some good things about going back home at 10 o'clock, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Getting to bed early, you know.
There you go. Yeah. Well, thank you for
Different
staying
time.
up with us
Yeah.
tonight. Thank you for staying up with us tonight. Anna will be tuning back in. Actually, her power cut out periodically. It's very
Okay.
windy out on the peninsula today. Her power dropped, but it's back now. And so she's just going to be logging back in. So yeah. No, I know what you mean about the earlier evenings, because we've been doing these talks with people in all kinds of
Yeah.
different time zones. You know, it's been, I'm doing one at noon my time today, you know, and a
Yeah.
lot of the time the evening ones are at 5 o'clock and they're done by 6, which is a whole different thing for me at this time of year. So yeah. Yeah. How has the bakery been? Did you have sort of the home baking explosion in all of
Yeah.
the stay home stuff like we did here? No?
Crazy. Yeah, I've done a lot of online cooking classes for it, and I've we actually tonight we had a baking class. I just left early. 25 people learning how to do the sourdough.
Oh yeah.
The bakery is doing amazing. I mean, my revenue has gone up since the lockdown because people still need bread and cake.
Yeah.
And then now we've been open. We have a huge area outside where we can seat 40 people without any problems and not next to each other. So we've been very lucky. And it closes at 6 o'clock because it's a very residential area. So it's not like a evening thing, but we have really nice lunch, open sandwiches and rye bread, of course, as you know, that I've cooked many times at the book Larder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that as you say, the community, the neighbors, everybody around us has been extremely supportive, very, very supportive, small local businesses. So we stay, you know, in business. But I will say the cooking class has been really, really popular because people need to do something and people are so into cooking at home at the moment.
Yeah. We were just discussing, Anna, welcome back.
Hi, I'm so sorry
I
about
forgot
that.
you're in a windstorm out on the peninsula, right?
We had thunder and lightning all morning, and I thought the power was going to go out all morning, and then it all stopped, and then it just flickered, and my entire computer shut down, and I had to turn everything back on. So I'm here now, and hopefully
Welcome
the power
back.
stays on.
Well, we were just finishing up discussing sort of how things are with the bakery and the cooking classes and things like that in COVID. So I will let you take things from here.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, happy to be here. Trina, I'm so excited to get to talk with you because I'm such a fan of your work, and it would be more fun in person, of course, but this is nice and requires less air travel, I guess.
I will be there as soon as you can travel again. That's for sure. I'm coming to the US again.
Well, if you guys already talked a little bit about what you've been up to, that's good. Maybe we can just kind of dive into the book itself.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to start with is in the intro, you mentioned that this book was kind of always in you, or that you kind of had started writing it sort of before you even knew. So I was hoping that you could maybe just tell us a little bit about your childhood and your food traditions and customs, and kind of how this book is sort of born out of that sort of life in food.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sorry. I grew up around really, really good food. My parents were good cooks. My grandparents were very good cooks, and some part of my childhood, I lived in a commune where cooking was a very big thing about the whole spirit of community and families living together. So in that sense, cooking has always been really, really important in my life. And it hasn't been weird that I ended up, because I did end up becoming a chef. It wasn't the plan. It was just always a thing I loved. But when I say that this book was always in me, is that I always loved vegetables, like really, also as a child. And normally a lot of children grows into it. But for me, you know, when all the vegetables comes in seasons and it was time to eat them, I was always so excited about it. And it's interesting with the publishing world because you have so many ideas to books, And a lot of the books I had ideas to, it took my, the people around me some years, and the market and all the other things that depended on you to write the books you want to write and getting the timing right. And right now, writing a book about season and vegetables and fruit is, of course, really up in the air and up in the time. Everybody wants to know, how can you live an everyday life and bring more vegetables into your everyday diet? So I was so happy that a year ago I started this book, and it's written with all the vegetables that comes from the farm that I collaborate with, that is situated like 50 kilometers outside Copenhagen.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about that sort of the right time in publishing, and I was thinking about that as I was, because in the intro you really cover everything from your personal love of vegetables, but then also this moment that we're in terms of climate change and our responsibility as eaters, but then also a health aspect too. And it's interesting that sort of all of those things come and converge at the same time. For you, have you always kind of thought about that convergence, or has that been something more recently? I mean, I know you've always loved vegetables, but in terms of eating being kind of like a responsibility to the environment, to the people who are, growing the vegetables, is that something that has always been a part of your food process?
Both yes and no. The organic has always been a really big part of my life. And in the 70s, when I was a little girl, that there was a lot of talk about the environment, but that it was much more about pollution in the air. And then it was about pesticides, eating organic and not wanting pesticides on your food. So that's where it started for me. The whole climate thing didn't happen until like 15 years ago or something, where I started understanding the problem of processed food and the meat consumption and how we use the land to grow all this feed for the animals and the balance of that, and how vegetables became much more difficult and harder to get. And all of these issues, of course, I worked with very intensely, you can say, for the last 15 years, but we didn't know all these things in the 90s. We also thought a lot of the climate problems would disappear with technology, or not disappear, but be solved with technology. But in the late 80s, I was part of a group in Denmark that took there was a prime minister in Norway called Brundtland, and she made the first really big report about the state of the planet. And I was part of a very big group who had that translated into Russian, and then we smuggled it into Russia because it was illegal there, because there was a denial about what was going on. So you can say that it's been part of my life always, but all the knowledge we have now, and what is going on in the food world, and the loss of biodiversity and all of that, combined with diet and all the other health issues we have, I wouldn't say that's been the last 15, 20 years.
Something that I've always appreciated about your work, and I actually went back to Scandinavian Comfort this morning as I was kind of going over my questions, because I remembered you mentioning in the introduction there that you had this mention, and I went to go find the specific sentence, because you said that you're not really somebody who abides by food trends, and you sort of are someone who's interested in food and excited about eating and eat healthy yourself, but that there's an enjoyment that comes. And I was thinking about, it's interesting with that idea of food trends, because I think that currently we're in a moment where there's a growing population of people who become more aware about what their food choices mean. But that, I think, is also paired with this escalation of food trends because of social media. So be that avocado toast or, kale, anything. And I'm just wondering if what you're sort of, do you see food trends as like being able to move us forward a little bit, or does it inhibit us in terms of having just a more holistic approach to what we eat?
I think both, but I think there's a lot of misinformation in what is healthy and not healthy, which is also, of course, I understand the jungle out there. I feel, of course, because for me, there's one thing we have to get straight right away. If food is not delicious, we're not going to get anywhere. So this is the first thing we need to figure out, because that's how we are wired as human beings. We need pleasure, and we need to feel that comfort of something that is delicious and tasty and has all the different flavors that will make us feel happy. So if you kind of deny yourself a lot of things, I think it won't work in the long run. You need to find a balance of all these things. Otherwise, you won't stick to it. It will be a regime or religion or something like that I don't believe in. And that's also why I absolutely do not like the word vegetarian. I do not understand why, because we don't have meat on the plate, it should be called something else. And I never understood this. And this is forever, and there's food cultures, especially if you look at the Italian kitchen, or you look at an Asian kitchen, or you look at, you wouldn't define it like we do here in the Western world, and especially in the northern Western world, America and UK, certainly also Denmark. If there's no meat, it's like, oh, we're having vegetarian food, And if you go to Italy and have a spaghetti alla limone and some cheese and some fruit, and that was dinner and a salad, nobody's going to call say, oh, we're having vegetarian tonight, So in that sense, I really dislike the labels of it. But I think responsible eating, I don't think we knew all of this 20 years ago that we do now. And it's not about, for me, I'm going to lift it up, my pink book. I have not written this book because I don't think we should eat meat. I really like meat. I love chicken. I couldn't live without eggs. I love dairy, cheese, all of it. But we just need to eat it not as often as we've done, and in much less portions. And then we need to spend our money on something that's been bred responsible according to the planet. So in a sense, you of course, I think it's very exciting that there's a lot of young people who are very interested in eating vegetables, but I will say the media talk a lot about it. And I am also part of a government entity in Denmark who actually measure the food culture. And if you want to measure how many people have turned vegan over the last year or two, you can't measure it. And it's less than 2% or 3% who will say they're vegetarian. So there's a lot of talk, but when it really comes down to it, we don't really know who is sticking to this kind of diet. So it's also, trends are difficult, because you might say it, and then when nobody else is looking, you eat it anyway.
Yeah. Well, and it becomes prescriptive too, doesn't it? Because I think it gives people, I think it's helpful for us to have definitions of things, because that helps to guide us a little bit. But at the same time, those definitions can be very restrictive. And if we don't feel that fits for us, then we don't even want to try it. Which then we lose out.
But there's also the social aspect that what I find very worrying in this whole idea of how we bring up children with food, that they have to be vegan, or they have to be raw food, or they can't have sugar and all of that. And I find that I understand the protection of your child's diet, of course, and being healthy. But it's also sad in the way that nowadays I always bake a lot of cakes because I test, and I live in this wonderful street where the children can live out, we have this play street and long tables for the neighbors to sit and eat together. And 10 years ago, if I baked a cake, I was not going to eat it, and lots of kids were playing, I would go out with the cake and cut it up, and everybody would get a little piece, and it would be really fun. And Trine, she gave us cake today. I wouldn't dare do that now. Because there's all these ideas, and there's sugar policies and so on and on. And I think from a social point of view, there's also something there that I find really difficult. And also, having, you can't just invite people for dinner, and you have to worry about, instead of you all sitting, sharing the same meal, having the same experience. Some of that I find really, really valuable. So I have really, you can say I have very mixed feelings about it, but that's not because I don't feel that we should be responsible. I just think it needs to be balanced.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for the record, I will always come and eat your cake whenever you're serving it. Yeah, but I think that that's an interesting point, because obviously there's a category of food allergies and people who can't eat certain things. And obviously we want to be respectful of that. But I think there is also another category of, like you're saying, it's like we went from one extreme to the other. So you do talk in your book about just eating less in general, and that we live in this culture where, if we're privileged enough to have money to spend on food, we often live in overabundance because we just have access to everything. And that I think that because we've gone to that extreme, the reaction to that is to go back to the other extreme, which is then what you're saying, like, I cut out these 10 things and I can't do this. And then we sort of miss out on this very special part about food, which is that it brings us together. It's a social thing. It's something we all have to do every day. And
history and tradition.
Yeah. And I know that you and you have mentioned that in other of your books too, that for you, it's the sort of like tradition and custom around food that is so essential. And ultimately the food is the physical sustenance, but the tradition is the emotional sustenance. And we need the two to go hand in hand. Yeah. I wanted to, one of the other quotes that stuck out to me from the introduction was, you said, I have always felt that the challenge of cooking is the transformation of vegetables into great dishes. And I kind of like that idea that, I think we like to think of vegetables. I think that in current food world, I think vegetables have gotten like a bad rap a little bit. Like we think of them as very simple, like, oh, it's just a salad or it's just a vegetable, but that really they're sort of these platforms for really amazing things to take place in terms of a dish. And I was wondering if you had an example of something that sort of comes off to you as like a great transformation of a vegetable into a dish.
There's lots. I mean, if you take the celeriac, which is just coming up I went to the farm a few days ago and pulled up celeriac from the soil, and when you cut it open, it's still juicy. It has all these smells, and I don't think I will ever be finished with cooking that root. And I come up with new recipes all the time. I salt baked it for a long time. Then I cut that up. I turn some of it into a puree. I pickle some and put it in sweet vinegar with lots of spices. I grate it to eat it raw in a salad. And sometimes I take 3 of these different ways of cooking it and putting it together in one dish with another vegetables that can then go along with that. Finding new ways of eating cabbage. I mean, I think cabbage is the most magical thing on this planet. I love cabbage. And there's Brussels sprouts there's also Brussels sprouts, but there's flower sprouts, which we also call caleta, which is a new breed it's in between kale and a Brussels sprout. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I've seen it in UK. I haven't been in US recently, but I know it's coming everywhere. It is sweet, it's tender, but it also have a little bitterness. It cooks for 2 minutes. It's really well. I've eaten it raw. I try to pickle it again. So what I think when I say this about vegetables is that I look at them and I always find new ways. And also if you look at you have meat, there's 9 kind of different meats, more or less. And then there's, of course, you could also eat animals we wouldn't eat on this side of the planet, but they will eat it somewhere else. But vegetables, we don't even know how many there are. There's still vegetables out there and fruit that we've never tried. And when it comes to meat, it's little like, oh, it's like a chicken, or it's more like then there's lamb and there's a beef and then there's pork and then there's variation of that. But vegetables and herbs, and that also goes for pulses and lentils, there's so much we don't even know. So for me, it is as a chef, it's a never ending journey. And there's new combination that I haven't thought of yet.
Well, as you were talking about celeriac, I was thinking one of the recipes that popped out to me was your fermented French fries, where you basically you slice the potato and you soak them for a few days. So they kind of I haven't made it yet, but from my interpretation, it sounds like it kind of gets a fermentation started within them. So you get a little bit of extra flavor. But as you were talking about the celeriac, I was thinking that could be fun to try with the celeriac, because I've made celeriac fries before, and that's kind of fun. Yeah.
Also, fermented celeriac is also, and also if you grate it together with cabbage and ferment it and make it like sauerkraut, it's really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
potatoes fermented, it's also amazing because you use the skin. So you cut the skins off the potatoes and then you ferment them separately, and then you bake the potatoes with olive oils in the oven while you fry the others. And that's also what I'm trying in the book, is to say, why does that have to be a side dish?
Mhm.
Why couldn't that lovely potatoes you spend so much time cooking, that's so good? I mean, how many, if fries are good, how many are going to eat? A lot. So maybe you don't need the steak and the béarnaise. Take that out and make a really tasty cabbage salad with that, and still a really lovely mayonnaise of some kind. And so it's also for me to, when we take the meat out, let's try to turn it all upside down. Nobody, said that food rules have to be meat, potatoes, and something with it. Who said that? We can do whatever we want. And in that sense, that's also the challenge. How do we look at putting the meal together in a new way?
Well, and I wonder if part of that comes from, like, here in the US, I think, like when I grew up, we had the food pyramid, which now they've tossed out, but there was sort of like this is how much of this you eat and this much. And now they've shifted to like a plate and it's more portion oriented. But I think probably a lot of our perceptions of food are, one, either learned in our families, but two, I mean, I think there has been this real push as to what we're supposed to eat, quote unquote. And then we think of a meal as, yeah, one part meat, a salad, and then the vegetables are just like an afterthought, really, which is unfortunate because that means those vegetables normally aren't very well prepared. You and your book, you have your own kind of ratio for it, right? Could you talk about your 80-20 principle?
Yeah, that's how I try to run the business, and that's also how I try to live. And that's saying that 80% of what I eat should come from plants and 20% should come from animals. So that goes for the cafe latte and the cheese and the beef and the chicken and the eggs. And it's difficult. I mean, I try to measure it over a week, and it doesn't, I'm much more 30-70. But it's a good framework to work towards. And in the business, we really do it when we serve open sandwiches for lunch every day, and we have only one with meat, and it's a chicken salad. I must admit, it's the best selling we have. Unfortunately, we also have a beetroot tartare and other things that sells okay, but still the chicken salad is the most popular. But I think the 80-20 is a really good framework, and lots of, both the UN and other NGOs have been working to prove that if we all went to that kind of diet and that ratio, we could change a lot of things quite quickly. Mm-hmm. But of course, that means probably not to have meat more, maybe once, maybe only one every second week, because you also want the cheese and the milk and all the other things. But
mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that you mentioned open-faced sandwiches, because I have had very little creative culinary motivation this whole summer, and so I basically have only been eating open-faced sandwiches. And I was joking to my husband, I was like, Trina wrote a book on open-faced sandwiches, which is the only thing that I could think to write a book on right now, but it's already been done. But I think open-faced sandwiches are the one thing that Americans should be eating more of, because they're so fun.
First of all, they're fun. They're fun to make. They come with a super healthy bread, which is the rye bread. It's slow carbs. And then it has, because of the way you put the flavors together, it have the same kind of satisfaction as eating a burger. Because it has all the 5 flavors, it will, the fat and the salt and all of it. So you just go to all the bliss points in the brain and make you happy. So I think, and open sandwiches was the first fast food in Denmark and the first takeaway. And of course you can have it very fancy and also simple.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, the first fast food, because I was thinking a lot of these things are really, there are strategies for cooking. They're sort of long-standing traditional techniques. We're sort of going back to the source in terms of the product, but also kind of like the culinary inspiration. And I'm wondering, I mean, you grew up in obviously a world of good food, but are there things that you feel you've always had with you, or are there sort of things that you have learned along the way that feel sort of things that you're trying to bring back in sort of in to make them new again?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in a very modern, you can say, world, with my parents being part of the left-wing movement and living in a different way, and therefore also cooking differently. I was exposed to a lot of Middle Eastern food, brown rice, beans and lentils, and all these things that weren't common in Denmark when I was a child. And then I had this extreme traditional cooking from my grandmother, which was all really homemade and good ingredients. But of course, not as many vegetables as I would eat. There were seasonal vegetables and they would be different. So I have modernized, especially the way my grandmother cooked. I've taken out a lot of the fat. Made it more easy so it didn't take 2 days. And then I've added vegetables to all of this more than she would. So I feel I've combined. And then of course, there's also, there's an abundance in vegetables now that is very, very exciting. Lots of salad I never had when I mean, I didn't have an avocado when I was little. I have very mixed feelings about this avocado movement. I haven't put it in my book. I did it with the open sandwiches because it was the most modern one to have. But I really think that to eat that much avocado in Denmark is ridiculous. I mean, it from a sustainable point of view, we should cut down unless we live somewhere near where they're grown. But I feel when it comes to the cabbage, but also the whole Asian influence. I mean, I don't know. I had ginger cookies, but I never had ginger in my cooking before I was 19 and went to New York, and I had, you know, Asian food for the first time in my life. So I've been influenced from a lot of things, and I will say that the cooking I grew up with was really good, but it wasn't as interesting as it is today. But I did not know that. So therefore, the meal I had, I thought were the best meals ever. So looking back, I didn't miss anything. But of course, as a chef and a food writer, I don't think times has been more exciting than it is right now.
Do you have kind of a favorite comfort food that's kind of your go-to when you feel like you need that?
It depends on a lot of things. If I've cooked too much and I come home and I'm really, really tired, and I've, you know, then I eat yogurt with muesli and a grated apple. That's like I think that's my husband, he will be looking at that. I really love pasta. I love when it's winter and I really feel I need to have something that will kind of power me up. That would be potato and celeriac soup. I think that would be one of my big things. But I also really love curries with lots of root vegetables. But I feel comfort food for me is not a burger. It's much more about the getting big flavors and feeling that you're eating something that makes you either heat you up or whatever. I mean, we're going into the cold season, so soups are important.
Yeah.
But I think the favorite thing is so difficult because it depends on so many things, and I have so much. But I think every day, that's my thing. I wake up every day and thinking, what should I eat today? And I never, you know, and then I'll cook a lot at work, and then I, you know, write things, and then in the end of the day, I've been eating a lot of different things, and then for dinner, you know, I sit down and eat yogurt with apples and muesli.
I love it. So unfortunately, while you were coming to kind of the end of doing this book, your father passed away. And you write about that in the book, and it's beautifully written and very powerful, I think, for anyone who's lost someone and had to use food as part of the grieving process a bit. And he gave you a piece of advice that I just love because it felt very useful for this moment that we're in. And that was, it is all the things you choose and don't choose that will define you. And I thought particularly for right now, that feels very, very timely, just in a moment that a lot of us are in a lot of uncertainty. And it can feel like we can't make any choices because we can't plan, we can't, we can't make trips, you come out with the book, you can't have a launch party. But I kind of loved this sentiment that he gave you, which was choose, have some control, but also let some things go.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you could talk about how maybe that that advice from him has maybe served you in, these last 6 months that have been so chaotic and so different and uncertain for all of us.
Yeah, I think it brings you to the moment, and to really try to only think about the one day you have and what you're going to do with that. Mm-hmm. And how you're going to, what is going to be the most important things to have done, or to spend, or to, and you spend the day, or to define, you can say, not time as you see it normally, but be better at just thinking of time right now. And my father was extremely good at that. He was a kind of person you could sit with, and you would forget time, and just, he would not talk. You just sit with him, and he was so present, and you felt his support without him saying anything at all, and love for that sake. And he always could bring me kind of down, calm me down. So I've been really trying to focus on that, on the moment, and just being, and looking at how, for me, also trying to really look about how lucky most of us are. We are not the ones who are suffering the most. I mean, some are, but for me personally, it's, I hadn't had to fire anybody. I've had to scale down. We have had to do all kinds of things, but we've done it collectively, and looked at every day and thought, how can we do it better tomorrow? And what would make sense not to do right now, instead of thinking of all the things we can't do. So what would make sense to, take care of this business, and take care of our lives, and take care of each other while we go through this as a community.
Mm-hmm. Well, and for that too, I think making food is exactly that, right? It's a process of being very present with what you're doing. I mean, the second you stop paying attention to something on the stove, right, it usually doesn't end too well. But then also, in thinking about the context of your book and sort of food that is better for the environment, there is this element of not mourning what we lose out on, but celebrating what we are choosing to use, because that is a good choice for us and the planet.
Yeah.
I was wondering about I kind of love the idea of the name being Scandinavian Green, because I think green plays into this idea of vegetables and leafy greens, but then also, of course, the environmental climate change angle. I was curious, did you write this? Is this book originally published in Danish and this is a translation, or is this one written in English first and foremost?
Foremost, yeah. I write in English, and then it gets translated, and I don't do that.
Okay.
My mom does that. So
were you thinking about that when you maybe you had the title when you started thinking about even writing this book, but I just kind of love that play on words.
Yes, actually, it was my working title, and I really loved it because it gave me, and you can say, an umbrella of all the things that I wanted to express, both in the writing and the pictures, and in the seasonal food. I mean, the book is in 4 seasons, which is the seasons that is where I live, and I find a very big part of what we also need to do is not demand everything all year round, but really go back to celebrating the seasons, and have strawberries for 6 weeks, but then eat them every day, and all of that. And I've been talking about this for 20 years, and And that has not only been about climate and all of that. It's also been about taste. I never understood why, let's eat it when it's really good and then not eat it when it's not that good because there'll be something else. So yes, the title was there from the beginning. We had a long conversations, my publicist and my editor and my commissioning editor about if the title was right, but it grew on them. And so I'm very happy about it.
I think that in the last few years, at least, I mean, I think that Scandinavian food in general has had a reputation for being, a little bit more vegetable centric, sort of simpler rustic fare that can play into this combination of sort of comfort, enjoyable, but also healthy. Do you think that Scandinavian food has changed over the last, as you've been working within food? So that's question one. And then question two, do you think that the perception of Scandinavian food has changed with people outside of Scandinavia?
First question, yes. Second question, yes. I think it has changed in a way that when people from the outside world looked at us and said, something is going on, that's interesting, we started to look at it much more and celebrate it more. The interest, it's like a snowball. And then, and I think that the idea of local, idea of being close to the land and being a small country where you're always quite near the countryside and all of that also played into it. And then I think we have evolved immensely, but I think that it's been a lot driven by food writers and restaurants but at the same time, there were a lot of things that happened here in the 80s and the 90s about where we're starting to evolve the way we were eating. But at the same time, what the new Nordic was more about than anything was to have restaurants that was different, because we never had a strong restaurant culture. We are like hygge became this world thing. We are this because, when you move away from home, the first thing you get is a dining table. It's not a television, because you sit and eat at the dining table and you have friends over all the time for dinner, and going out to restaurants were something special. And I still have friends that I've known all my life and I've never been to a restaurant with them because that's just not just what we do. So apart from that going on there, it has influenced and we have influenced the restaurants, the home kitchens, and the other way around. And I think that the way we eat cabbage and the way we eat root vegetables has really changed, where they were much more overcooked. The cabbage were always in a sauce. All of these things has evolved since the 90s.
Yeah. I do want to remind people I'd love to do some questions from people who are watching right now. So I know Laura did a little call out there but I think you can use the Q&A button to drop in a question for Trine. Because you do write in English, do you, just in thinking about that idea of Scandinavian food, I mean, knowing that you're writing for an English speaking market outside of Denmark and Scandinavia, how does that influence what you do? Do you think that you write a bit differently or showcase different foods than you might if you were writing for the Danish audience? I'm just interested by that.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when we publish it in Denmark, which will be in the spring, I rewrite all the intros because there's some things that I explain to people who don't live here that is too obvious for a Dane that I won't have to explain, especially about rye bread and open sandwiches and why do we eat this and why do we eat that, and all of that goes out. But I don't change the recipes. I still would do a lot of, if I wrote this Scandinavian green it would be the same. Of course, a comfort food, more or less also, but there's more of these dishes that are, of course, are more obvious to the Danes. But I don't think if you took a young person, somebody in their early 20s, and gave them the comfort food book, they would be, whoa, wow, is that a Danish dish? Because they were brought up on tacos and, so many things that they don't really know about what real Danish food or Scandinavian food is. So in that sense, but of course, I do not. I write books about my culture and the way I see the seafood to an audience around the world, and of course I think about that. It wouldn't be true if I didn't, because I also really strongly want to represent an idea, my idea of how we could live a better life through food, and how we all have, I believe, a right to that. So in that sense, that's also my message when I write cookbooks.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you said very early on in this conversation about that, good food needs to be delicious, right? If it doesn't taste good, then there's sort of no point in trying, because you're not gonna get attached to something that tastes bad. With that in mind, just thinking about recipes in our book. So let's think about the autumn chapter, since we're all going into fall. What are some of the recipes that, I won't say favorites, because you probably have a lot of favorites, but are there any kind of recipes in the autumn chapter that you just are particularly excited about right now, or would be good to tempt people to get the book?
I'm flipping through it now. It's like, oh, what is it? There's a cauliflower curry that I really love with Brussels sprouts. There's a phyllo tart with beetroots. Beetroots are just coming out of the soil right now. They're so sweet and juicy, so I would recommend that. There's also a Caesar salad with red kale, which I really like. That's lunch maybe. And then, oh my God, the baked celeriac, and then my apple and onion and potato hash, where you just take apple and onions and potatoes and fry them with lots of garlic and rosemary and eat it. Really comforting. So, and I also have one with burnt carrot and lentil cream. I think that's also quite satisfying. And I think carrots all, they will be all harvested now and stored all through the winter. So, and because they're in this part of the season, they're very sweet. They have a lot of sweetness in them. And cauliflower gratin. Oh my God, there's lots. The potatoes.
Yeah, there's so many. I just have the PDF version right now, but as I was scrolling through it, which is much less enjoyable than paging through a book, but there were so many things. It actually got me. I was like, oh, I'm excited to cook again now going into fall. I have a couple questions here from people watching. So one question, Laura, is it okay if I read these? Or?
Oh yeah, you go for it. I'll hop back out.
So Taylor wants to know what the differences are in food scenes between Copenhagen, Oslo, and Stockholm.
Yeah, what's the difference? I think the difference between, Oslo, I feel are doing really well on the top Michelin high end. I don't feel that is so much at the middle range that is as exciting going on there as there is in Copenhagen. And I also think when it comes to quirky little places and the whole baking movement, Copenhagen has more to offer right now. I think Oslo has a street food market that's okay. When it comes to Stockholm, I think they have a chef like Matthias Dahlgren and Niklas Ekstad, who does amazing things with vegetables and interpreting what I would call the new Nordic way of seeing things. But when it comes to variety and a lot of like small places, I think that's, and then of course the open sandwiches is a big difference. We have a huge, you can say, revolution, I would almost call it, in open sandwiches in Copenhagen. And since that is the Danish tradition and not Norwegian and Sweden, that also makes a difference.
Yeah. Somebody actually asked if this book has a specific chapter on vegetarian or on, well, they said veg, so I don't know if that means vegetable or vegetarian, but we'll go with veg. Open face sandwiches.
there is in each of the 4 chapters, there is 2 or 3 pieces of open sandwiches only with vegetables. So that means there's 12 new versions of open sandwiches in the book that I made specifically for this book. Yeah.
Nice. Let's see, I think those were the only 2 that we had. I'm just gonna mark that they were answered. I was when I was looking through this, so I have a very good Danish friend whose mother was visiting a couple of years ago, and she had a book. It was a Danish cookbook. I don't remember the title of it, but it was basically reviving lots of kind of 70s kind of hippie recipes. And from that one, I have one that I make a lot, which I loved, which was a mushroom pate. And I was so excited because you have a mushroom pate recipe in your book. So I was wondering, is that something that you grew up with or had earlier? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. That was a big 70s thing to have a mushroom pate.
Yeah.
So I think I made the recipe more delicious than my mom's. She knows that. I told her.
So how is it different than what your mom made?
I put walnuts in this one. I made it more smooth, and therefore, yeah. My mom's were a bit more rustic, and I didn't like the chewy mushrooms in it. I liked it more. I like it more smooth than with this one.
Yeah, the recipe that I've used, sometimes I will make it thicker, and then I actually like scoop it out and put them on a baking plate, and then kind of make like fake meatballs. That's kind of fun too. Yeah. Oh, so it's open face sandwiches, big topic here. Somebody wants to know what specifically makes an open face sandwich so different from a 2-sided sandwich. Is it just the visibility of the fillings, or what's the difference?
I mean, the difference is, first of all, is the bread. And there has to be butter on the bread. It can't be mayonnaise like in a sandwich or whatever you put in a sandwich. And then there has to be at least 3 of the 5 flavors represented. And then there has to be something soft and something crunchy. So already there, you need to think about the structures of it and the flavor combination. And then, of course, you have the base, and then you have something umami, it should be. And then you have mayonnaise or cream cheese or smoked cheese or something in little dots around it. And then you build it from there. So it's also an idea of how you put combinations together, and at the same time, it has to look quite, nice. I mean, I know the burger is amazing, and I also had amazing burgers in my life, but it doesn't look pretty. I'm sorry. A burger, it's more like, this is it, I'm eating it, it's making me feel good, but open sandwiches has to be, delicious, and you have to think through what it should look like. I mean, unless it's what I do for lunch every day, where I put a piece of bread quickly with some eggs and tomatoes on the top, salt and pepper, and eat it. But that's not the, when you really are making it for other, it has to have that thing as well.
Yeah, well, and I love that too, because we think of food as a mostly taste sensory thing, but there's the visual sensory element of eating as well, which
that's the first thing that happens when you sit down.
What soups are you making? I guess we'll say right now. I don't know if that's what Judy intended, but what soups are you making right now?
Cauliflower, pumpkin, and potatoes and celeriac. But the soup I make the most is I take my vegetable drawer in my refrigerator, and I chop all the old things that's down there, and the not so crisp cabbage and whatever, and I fry it all up with some garlic and some spices, and then I blend it, and I eat it with some really nice bread. That's a lot of my dinners, especially in the wintertime. But I have a lot of soups that's really, really good, but I don't have the recipes because I can never remake them, because I never throw anything out. So that's probably, but otherwise, I love creamy soups, the blended ones.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other things that you do with food that's just past its prime? I won't say gone off, but any other
No,
things that you do to kind of
fine.
reduce waste?
Yeah, I also do that with like vegetable patties. So I chop it up and put eggs and polenta and a bit of flour in this and made vegetable meatballs from it. That is also a really good way of using it. Or making a kind of a pesto. You can make it, you can from kale, if you have a little bit of kale and arugula and some old parsley that's sitting there, not like that, it can go into a really nice pesto.
Yeah, carrot
And
greens too.
yeah, and carrot greens, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like somebody's making the pumpkin soup tonight for their cookbook club, which is fun. So that's from this book, I believe, the
Yeah,
comfort
that's
food book. Yeah.
Yes.
And then somebody else made the fish cakes from this book last night, which is fun. So
Great.
it looks like people are definitely making these recipes.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. So we've got 5 more minutes. We could take another question if somebody wants to hop in with one. Otherwise, I'm gonna ask well, it's just a personal question, really. So I obviously I wrote a book about fika, so I just love the slow moment of coffee break. And I wanted to know what your favorite thing to have with coffee was.
That depends what time of the day we're talking.
Let's say morning coffee.
Morning coffee. I have 2 breakfasts. I have the one that and that's fried rye bread with cheese and a soft boiled egg. The other one is and this is a new one, because I've been on a diet not a diet. When I say diet, I'm not talking about a losing weight diet, but I've been trying to be much more healthy and not as stressful, and then put more attention to my meals. And one way of doing that is to cook a big breakfast. And therefore my new breakfast is also toasted rye bread, fried cabbage, and a fried egg on top, sunny side up. So that's been one of my new breakfasts, and I like that with my coffee in the morning. And then on Fridays, because I have a bakery and I can't eat a croissant or cardamom bun or a cinnamon bun every day, because that won't work for lots of reasons. So Friday is my coffee and bun morning, and I either have a Danish pastry, and my favorite is one that we do with something we call remonge, which is marzipan inside, poppy seeds, and it's very delicious, or a cardamom bun, of course.
Yeah. I love that too, that sense of, I think, especially now when a lot of people are working from home and don't have their sort of normal routines of going to work, or I think it's so nice to create like a regular routine and ritual for yourself like that. Like, and then you look forward to that Friday morning, I bet.
Yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Great.
But I can show you, if we talk about in the afternoon, there's a Danish, this vegetarian book that I've written on. I said vegetarian, you can see I'm so influenced. This book about this Scandinavian green, and I don't know if you can see this. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
Yep. Yeah. The little chocolate cakes.
Yeah. This is biscuit chocolate cakes, and it's very, very traditional Danish. So it's like a regular vanilla biscuits in a chocolate ganache, and you put it in layers, and then you let it sit. And that is a perfect cake with coffee. So if it was in the afternoon here in the winter, this would be one of my go-to cakes with a cup of coffee.
Yeah. Is that similar to the Swedish radiokaka?
A little, but that's
okay.
sweeter. This has darker chocolate.
Okay. Well, it sounds good. I want that. I want all of those things.
Yes, I agree completely. This has been so much fun. Trine and Anna, thank you so much for joining us. Trine from, late at night in Denmark, and Anna from the windstorm on the peninsula.
I'm just happy my power didn't go out again.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. The book is, of course, available at booklarder.com. Trine, congratulations again on yet another wonderful book. And Anna, thank you again for your time. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone, and happy Scandinavian cooking, baking, and everything else. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.